girl whispered one word to the police dog. 2 minutes later, the dog did something shocking. A woman in a simple red dress gets pulled over on a lonely street, just trying to make it home. The officer's tone turns sharp. The police dog stares at her, like it already knows something is wrong. And when she leans in and whispers one quiet word, everything erupts. The dog doesn't attack her. It turns on something else, something no one saw coming. Within minutes, the officer loses control. Backup rushes in, and the truth starts cracking open. Because this wasn't just a traffic stop. It was the start of a secret that someone has been hiding for years. And the only witness who knows the whole story walks on 4 legs. What did the dog sense that no one else could? And why did one whispered word flip the entire night upside down? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below. And while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. The evening sun cast long shadows across the aging shopping strip as Kalia Rhodes gripped her steering wheel, her tired fingers aching from 12 straight hours of deliveries. Her simple red dress, chosen for comfort during the long shift, now felt wrinkled and worn. The old sedan hummed beneath her, a faithful companion through countless routes and destinations. Her thoughts drifted to Deontay, her 10-year-old nephew, probably already finished with his homework and waiting for her at Mrs. Martinez's apartment next door. A small smile crossed her face as she imagined his eager questions about her day, his bright eyes always full of curiosity and love. That boy was her world, her reason for pushing through these exhausting shifts. The familiar storefronts slid past, Joey's Pizza with its flickering neon sign, the dusty window of Sam's Hardware, the empty parking lot of the old movie theater. Kalia checked her rearview mirror, a habit born from years of careful driving. Blue lights suddenly flashed behind her, cutting through the growing dusk. Her heart skipped a beat, but she kept her movements steady, signaling properly before pulling to the curb. Years of dealing with traffic stops had taught her the drill. Calm, polite, and professional was the way to handle this. She placed both hands on the wheel where they could be seen. Officer Dean Briggs approached her window, his broad chest puffed out beneath his uniform, flashlight beam sweeping across her face. Behind him, a German shepherd, his K9 partner, stood at attention, watching the scene with alert intelligence. "License and registration?" Briggs demanded, his tone carrying an edge that made Kalia's skin prickle. "Of course, officer," she replied evenly, reaching slowly for her glove compartment. "May I ask why I'm being stopped?" "Busted taillight," he said curtly, though Kalia knew for certain she'd checked all her lights just yesterday. "Been having some problems in this area lately. Lots of suspicious activity." The way he emphasized suspicious made her stomach tighten. She recognized this type of stop, the kind where the reason given wasn't the real reason at all. As she handed over her documents, she noticed how Briggs barely glanced at them, his attention focused instead on trying to peer into her back seat. "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am," he ordered. "Need to conduct a search." "Officer Briggs," Kalia said carefully, reading his nameplate. "I don't consent to a search. I haven't done anything wrong, and you haven't stated probable cause." His face hardened. "Ma'am, when my K9 partner indicates the presence of contraband, that gives me probable cause." He gestured to the German shepherd, who had not made any such indication. "Now step out of the vehicle." Something clicked in Kalia's mind as she watched the dog. Its posture was professional, trained, but its eyes held something else. Recognition flickered through her memory. Years ago, during her engagement to a K9 officer, she'd learned the commands they used. Dutch words, precise and clear. The dog, Titan she could see on his vest now, watched her with an intensity that seemed almost meaningful. Unlike Briggs's hostile energy, the shepherd's gaze felt honest, pure. Briggs was moving toward her door handle, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Last warning. Step out of the vehicle, or—" Kalaya leaned slightly toward Titan, her voice barely above a whisper, as she spoke a single Dutch word, one that had stayed with her through the years. Her heart pounded as she waited to see if her desperate gamble would work. The tension in the air crystallized as that single command hung between them, human and dog, truth and deception, power and justice. Whatever happened next would change everything, and Kalaya knew there would be no going back. The German shepherd's ears twitched forward at the sound of the Dutch command, his intelligent eyes fixed on Kalaya's face. In that moment, with the blue light still flashing and Officer Briggs's shadow looming at her window, Kalaya held her breath, waiting to see how her whispered word would reshape the night ahead. The Dutch command hung in the air for what felt like an eternity. Though only seconds passed, Titan's ears remained perked forward, his intelligent eyes locked with Kalaya's. She could see the subtle shift in his posture, something awakening in the trained police dog's demeanor. Officer Briggs yanked on Titan's leash, pulling him back. "Out of the vehicle, now!" His voice had taken on an even harder edge. Kalaya complied, her hands visible as she stepped out into the cool evening air. The blue lights continued their rhythmic flash across the aging storefront windows, creating moving shadows that danced across the pavement. She stood straight, dignified in her wrinkled red dress, despite the fear churning in her stomach. "Stand over there," Briggs commanded, pointing to the curb. "Hands where I can see them." As Kalaya moved to the designated spot, Briggs began circling her sedan, making a show of examining the vehicle. Titan, however, seemed distracted. The German shepherd's nose twitched, and his head kept turning toward the patrol car parked behind them. "Officer," Kalaya said carefully, "I really don't understand what—" "Quiet," Briggs snapped, but his command was interrupted by a sudden movement. Titan lunged forward with unexpected force, the leash slipping from Briggs's grip. The shepherd bounded straight for the patrol car, his powerful body moving with unmistakable purpose. He reached the cruiser's trunk and began barking insistently, his paws scratching at the metal. "Titan, heel!" Briggs shouted, his face flushing red. "Heel now!" But the dog ignored him completely, continuing to bark and scratch at the trunk with increasing urgency. The commotion drew the attention of a second patrol car that had been parked around the corner. Officer Martinez, a younger officer Kalaya recognized from the neighborhood, approached with concern. "Everything okay here, Briggs?" "Fine," Briggs said through gritted teeth. "Just equipment malfunction. Dog's acting up." Titan's barking grew more intense, his claws leaving marks on the trunk's paint. Officer Martinez frowned, reaching for his keys. "Maybe we should check it out. Protocol, you know." "That won't be necessary," Briggs began, but Martinez was already moving to unlock the trunk. The metal creaked open, and Titan immediately stuck his nose inside, indicating specific areas with practiced precision. Officer Martinez's expression changed from confusion to shock as he reached in and pulled out a sealed package. "What the hell?" Martinez examined the package, then reached deeper into the trunk. "There's more here, a lot more." He pulled out another package, then a stack of bound cash. "Briggs, what is this?" Kalaya watched the scene unfold with growing horror as she realized what was happening. But before she could process it fully, Briggs spun toward her, his face contorted with rage and calculation. "Arrest her!" he barked at Martinez. "She's involved in this somehow. Used some kind of command to trigger my dog, trying to expose our operation. She must be working with them." "What?" Kalaya's voice rose in disbelief. "That's ridiculous! I was just driving home from work!" But Briggs was already grabbing her arms, roughly pulling them behind her back. The cold metal of handcuffs bit into her wrists as he tightened them with unnecessary force. "You have the right to remain silent," he began, his voice loud enough to draw attention from the few passers-by. "This is wrong," Kalaya protested, her mind racing to Deontay, to Mrs. Martinez waiting in their apartment building. "I didn't do anything! Officer Martinez, please!" Martinez stood by the trunk, still holding the evidence, looking uncertain. "Briggs, maybe we should—" "Call it in," Briggs cut him off. "I'll handle the suspect, and get control of my dog." Titan was, whining now, pulling against Martinez's grip on his leash as Briggs shoved Kalaya toward the second patrol car. The shepherd's eyes followed her, and she could see the confusion in them, the conflict between his training and what was happening. "It's okay, boy," she whispered as they passed, though her own voice shook. The dog strained against the leash, but Martinez held firm, pulling him away from the scene. As Briggs pushed her into the back of the patrol car, Kalaya caught one last glimpse of Titan being dragged toward another vehicle, his resistance visible in every step. The shepherd's distressed whines echoed in her ears as the door slammed shut, trapping her in a cage of silence and fear. Through the window she watched Officer Martinez speaking rapidly into his radio, while still trying to control Titan. The dog continued to fight against the leash, his training warring with what he knew to be right. More patrol cars were arriving now, their lights adding to the chaotic dance of shadows and colors across the street. Kalaya leaned her head back against the seat, her heart pounding. The handcuffs dug into her back, a physical reminder of how quickly everything had spiraled out of control. She thought of Deontay waiting at home, of the bills that needed paying, of her delivery job that she couldn't afford to lose. Tears threatened to fall, but she blinked them back, refusing to let Briggs see her cry. In the growing commotion outside, she could still hear Titan's protests growing fainter as he was finally pulled away from the scene. The German shepherd's exposure of the truth had somehow led to her arrest, and now both of them were being punished for it. The irony might have made her laugh if the situation weren't so terrifying. Through the windshield, she watched Briggs speaking intensely with newly arrived officers, his hands moving in animated gestures as he no doubt spun his version of events. The evidence from his trunk was being photographed and documented, but Kalaya knew with growing dread that somehow, some way, he was going to try to pin this on her. The radio crackled with voices, and the car began to move. As they pulled away from the curb, Kalaya caught one final glimpse of Titan in her side mirror, still straining against his restraints, still trying to make someone understand. Then they turned a corner, and both the dog and the scene disappeared from view, leaving Kalaya alone with her fears and the growing realization that this night was far from over. The fluorescent lights of the booking area buzzed overhead as Kalaya stood for her mugshot, her heart heavy in her chest. The flash left spots dancing in her vision while an officer's monotone voice droned through the process. "Face forward. Now left. Now right." Her fingerprints came next, each digit pressed carefully onto the scanner. The whole process felt surreal, like something happening to someone else. But the cold metal bench beneath her and the lingering ache in her wrists from the handcuffs were all too real. "Rhodes, Kalaya," the booking officer read from her ID. "Charges are obstruction of justice and interfering with a police K-9 unit." She wanted to argue, to explain, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, her mind raced to Deontay. He would be waiting at home, probably wondering why she wasn't there to help with his homework like she promised. Mrs. Martinez from next door would check on him. But for how long? The booking officer's voice cut through her thoughts. "Your personal effects will be returned upon release. Sign here." Kalaya's hand trembled as she signed the form. Among her belongings, she spotted her phone. One call. That's all she'd get. But who? She had no family besides Deontay, and most of her friends couldn't afford bail. Her delivery service account would be frozen as soon as the arrest hit the system, cutting off her main source of income. Ma'am? The officer held out a scratched landline phone. You get one phone call. Before she could reach for it, a new voice interrupted. Hold that thought. A tall man in plain clothes approached, his badge hanging from a chain around his neck. Detective Roman Hale, I need to speak with Ms. Rhodes first. The detective's expression was unreadable as he led her to a small interview room. Unlike the harsh overhead lights in booking, this room had a softer glow that made the institutional green walls look almost peaceful. Almost. Please, sit. Hale gestured to a chair, taking the one opposite. His movements were deliberate, measured, like someone used to watching reactions carefully. I've been reviewing the body cam footage from your arrest. Kalaya's throat tightened. Am I required to have a lawyer present? This isn't an official interview, Hale said, his voice surprisingly gentle. I'm just trying to understand something. The K-9 unit, Titan, he responded to you differently than I've ever seen him react with Officer Briggs. She sat perfectly still, weighing her options. The detective's face showed genuine curiosity rather than accusation, but she'd already learned how quickly things could turn. I noticed something else too, Hale continued, pulling out a tablet. He played a clip from the body cam footage, focusing on the moment just before Titan broke away from Briggs. Right here. You said something to the dog. What was it? Kalaya studied Detective Hale's face. There was something in his eyes, not just curiosity now, but something deeper, like he was hoping for her answer to confirm something he already suspected. It was Dutch, she said finally. A command word in Dutch. Hale leaned forward slightly. And how would you know Dutch K-9 commands? My ex-fiancé, she replied, the words coming easier now. He was a K-9 officer in another district. He used to practice commands with me while training his dog. That was 3 years ago, but I remembered some of them. The command you used, what did it mean? Search, Kalaya said, quietly. It means search. Hale nodded slowly, making a note in his small notebook. And Titan responded immediately? Yes, but not the way Officer Briggs expected. She hesitated, then added, the dog went straight for the patrol car instead of my vehicle. The detective's pen paused on the paper. He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. This isn't the first time I've seen questionable arrests connected to Officer Briggs, he said carefully, or situations where evidence seemed to appear exactly where he needed it to be. The weight of his words hung in the air between them. Kalaya felt a slight shift in the atmosphere, like a door opening just a crack, letting in a breath of fresh air. Detective, she said, choosing her words carefully. I was just driving home from work. I deliver food and packages. You can check my work history. I have a 10-year-old nephew waiting for me at home. I would never do anything to risk losing him. Something in Hale's expression softened. Your nephew. Is there someone with him now? My neighbor, Mrs. Martinez. But she can't stay forever, and I can't afford bail. My delivery account will be frozen as soon as this hits the system. The reality of her situation crashed over her again, bringing fresh waves of worry. Hale closed his notebook and sat back, studying her. Ms. Rhodes, I'm going to be straight with you. Something doesn't add up here, and it's not just your story. I've been watching Officer Briggs for months, but nothing concrete ever sticks. Then tonight, his own K-9 partner exposes drugs in his vehicle right after you give a command? I was just trying to prove I had nothing to hide, Kalaya said softly. I never expected Titan to find anything in the patrol car. The detective nodded slowly. The dog's response was genuine. That much is clear from the footage. And in my experience, canines don't lie. They either find something or they don't. A moment of understanding passed between them. Kalaya felt some of the tension leave her shoulders, replaced by a cautious hope. Detective Hale might not be completely on her side yet, but at least he was willing to look past the surface of things. "What happens now?" she asked. "For now, you'll still need to go through processing," Hale said, standing. "But I'm going to keep looking into this, and Ms. Rhodes?" He paused at the door. "Make that phone call count. Get someone to take care of your nephew. This might take a while to sort out." As he left, Kalaya felt the weight of everything pressing down on her. Deontay waiting at home, her frozen income, the uncertain future ahead. But something had shifted during that conversation. In Detective Hale's willingness to listen, to question, she'd found a tiny spark of hope to hold on to. Back in the booking area, she picked up the phone, her fingers hovering over the keypad. She had one call to make it count, just like Detective Hale said. One call to make sure Deontay was taken care of while she fought to prove her innocence. The fluorescent lights continued their endless buzz overhead as she began to dial, praying she was making the right choice. Detective Roman Hale sat at his desk, surrounded by stacks of case files. The harsh fluorescent lights cast shadows across the papers spread before him, each one a piece of Officer Briggs's history. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, forgotten as patterns began emerging from the documents. "This can't be coincidence," he muttered, pushing back from his desk to grab a fresh notepad. The clock on the wall showed 2:30 in the morning, but sleep was the furthest thing from his mind. He began listing the commonalities: sudden drug discoveries during routine stops, vague incident reports with key details missing, and a disturbing number of arrests connected to the same trafficking network. The similarities were too precise to ignore. Roman pulled up another file on his computer, this one detailing Briggs's impressive arrest record. On the surface, it looked exemplary: countless drug busts, all backed by his canine partner's alerts. But something felt off about the timing. "Hey, Thompson," he called out to the night shift records clerk. "Can you pull everything we have on Briggs's canine certifications? Training logs, deployment records, everything." While waiting, he reviewed his notes from the interview with Kalaya Rhodes. Her story about knowing Dutch commands had checked out. Her former fiancé was indeed a K-9 officer in the neighboring district, but there was something else she'd mentioned that kept nagging at him. When Thompson delivered the K-9 records, Roman noticed another pattern. Titan's training logs showed perfect scores, but the testing dates were irregular. Some certificates appeared to be backdated. The door to the records room creaked open, and Kalaya Rhodes stepped in, escorted by an officer. She looked tired but composed, her simple red dress wrinkled from hours in holding. "Ms. Rhodes," Roman said, gesturing to a chair. "Thank you for agreeing to talk again. I have some questions about what you mentioned earlier." The escorting officer left, and Kalaya sat down, her hands folded in her lap. "Did you find something?" "Maybe." Roman spread out several files. "But first, I need you to tell me about your brother." Kalaya's expression tightened. "Malachi? What does he have to do with this?" "Earlier, you mentioned he had concerns about police corruption. I need to know exactly what he saw." She was quiet for a long moment, studying her hands. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "It was about 8 months ago. Malachi was working late at the shipping company, handling overnight deliveries. He started noticing patterns, certain packages being redirected, specific officers always on duty for particular shipments." Roman leaned forward. "Officers like Briggs?" Kalaya nodded. "Malachi kept notes. He was going to report it, but then..." She swallowed hard. "They said it was an overdose. But Malachi never touched drugs. Never. Roman pulled out another file, this one thinner than the others. Malachi Rhodes, found deceased in his apartment. Toxicology showed high levels of fentanyl. He looked up at Kalaya. The investigating officer was Dean Briggs. What? Kalaya's hands gripped the edge of the desk. No one told me that. I was never allowed to see the full report. Roman spread out more papers, arrest records, incident reports, all connected to Briggs. Look at these dates. Each major drug bust coincides with shipping schedules from your brother's company. The same trafficking network keeps appearing, but somehow the higher-ups always escape arrest. Kalaya's eyes widened as she scanned the documents. These addresses, some of them are along my delivery routes, places where Briggs has pulled me over before tonight. He's been watching you, Roman said grimly, probably since your brother's death, testing to see if you knew anything. And tonight, when I made Titan search his car instead of mine, you accidentally exposed what your brother died trying to reveal. Roman ran a hand through his hair. Briggs isn't just a corrupt cop making false arrests. He's part of something bigger, a trafficking operation using his position and his K9 partner to manipulate the system. Kalaya stood up suddenly, pacing the small room. All this time, I thought Malachi's death was just swept under the rug. But it was Briggs. He killed my brother and made it look like an overdose. We can't prove that yet, Roman cautioned. But your command to Titan tonight created a major problem for him. Those drugs in his cruiser weren't planted. They were probably part of a delivery he was supposed to make. That's why he arrested me so quickly, Kalaya said. He needed to discredit me before I could say anything about what Titan found. Roman gathered the files into a neat stack. This goes beyond a crooked traffic stop, Ms. Rhodes. Briggs has built an entire network within the department. The question is, how far up does it go? Kalaya sank back into her chair. What do we do now? First, we need to protect you. Once Briggs realizes we're connecting these dots, you'll be in danger. Roman pulled out his phone. I'm calling in some favors to get your bail processed. You need to be careful. No regular patterns. Stay away from your usual routes. I can't just hide, Kalaya protested. I have to work. Deontay depends on me. I understand. But right now, staying alive is your first priority. Your brother tried to expose this alone, and it got him killed. Roman met her eyes. Let me help you do this right. Kalaya was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Malachi always said the truth would come out eventually. He just didn't live to see it. We'll make sure his death wasn't for nothing, Roman promised. But we have to be smart about this. Briggs has had years to build his operation. One wrong move, and we'll lose our chance to bring it all down. As they sat surrounded by the evidence of years of corruption, both felt the weight of what they'd discovered. What had started with a simple traffic stop had exposed a web of deception that had already claimed at least one life. And somewhere in the city, Officer Briggs was surely realizing that his carefully constructed world was beginning to unravel. The fluorescent lights continued their endless hum as Roman and Kalaya began planning their next moves, knowing that every step would have to be carefully calculated. The truth about Malachi's death, and the corruption he died trying to expose, was finally coming to light. But exposing it without becoming the next victims would require all their courage and cunning. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Geneva Polk's training yard, where worn equipment and weathered obstacles stood as testament to years of dedicated K9 training. Geneva watched from her wooden porch as Detective Roman Hale's sedan pulled up the gravel driveway, followed by a modest compact car she assumed belonged to the woman he'd mentioned. Kalaya Rhodes. Geneva straightened her practical work jacket and descended the stairs, her sturdy boots crunching on the gravel. After Roman's urgent phone call about Titan's unusual behavior, she'd spent hours digging through her old training logs. What she'd found had only deepened her concern. As Kalaya stepped out of her car, Geneva noticed her careful movements, the watchfulness of someone who knew they were in danger. Roman made quick introductions, and Geneva's weathered hands clasped Kalaya's firmly. "Roman tells me you managed to get Titan to expose hidden drugs in Briggs's cruiser," Geneva said, getting straight to the point. "With a Dutch command?" Kalaya nodded. "Just one word. Zoek. I remembered it from my ex-fiancé's training days. Search command. Basic, but essential." Geneva's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Titan was one of my best trainees before I retired. His responses were always textbook perfect. A sharp bark cut through their conversation. They turned to see Officer Briggs's patrol car pulling up, Titan sitting alertly in the back. Geneva's jaw tightened at the way Briggs yanked the dog's leash as he led him out. "Officer," she said coolly, "Roman mentioned you agreed to a behavior evaluation." "Just following procedure," Briggs replied with forced pleasantness, "though I don't see why it's necessary. Titan's record speaks for itself." "We'll see about that." Geneva gestured to her training yard. "Let's start with some basic protocols." For the next hour, they ran through standard tests. Geneva watched Titan's every move with expert eyes, noting how the dog's attention kept drifting to Kalaya despite Briggs's commands. When Briggs grew frustrated and jerked the leash, Geneva's face darkened. "Let's try something different," she announced. "Ms. Rhodes, would you mind assisting?" Kalaya stepped forward cautiously. Geneva handed her a training pouch and whispered instructions. They watched as Briggs attempted to direct Titan through a search pattern using English commands. The dog moved half-heartedly, his responses delayed and uncertain. Then Kalaya spoke a single Dutch command. Titan's entire demeanor changed. His movements became precise, his focus razor-sharp. He worked the search grid perfectly, finding every hidden training aid without hesitation. "Well, would you look at that?" Geneva said quietly, though her expression suggested she'd expected exactly this outcome. Titan's responding to proper Dutch commands like he was trained to do, almost like he's been waiting for someone to speak his original language. Briggs's face reddened. "This is ridiculous. He's my partner. He knows English commands perfectly well." "Does he?" Geneva pulled out a recorder. "Let's see how he responds to some of your previous operations." She played back recordings from Briggs's body cam footage, incidents where he claimed Titan had indicated drugs. The dog's head tilted at the sound of his handler's voice, but he made no move to respond to the commands. "Interesting," Geneva remarked. "Those alerts you reported? They don't match Titan's actual trained responses. I should know. I wrote his original certification papers." Kalaya knelt beside Titan, who pressed against her leg trustingly. "He knows the difference between real commands and—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Staged ones." Geneva nodded grimly. "A well-trained K9 doesn't just forget years of proper protocol. Unless—" She let the implication hang in the air. Roman stepped forward. "Unless someone deliberately tried to alter that training for their own purposes." "This is nonsense," Briggs snapped. "I don't have to listen to these accusations." He reached for Titan's leash, but the dog backed away, staying close to Kalaya. Geneva's voice carried years of authority. "Officer Briggs, I've trained hundreds of police dogs. I know when one's been misused. Titan's behavior today proves he remembers his original training, and he's choosing to follow it rather than whatever methods you've been using." She turned to Roman. "Detective, I'll be filing a formal report about this evaluation, including my concerns about possible misconduct in previous operations." Briggs's face had gone from red to pale. "You can't." "I can, and I will." Geneva's tone was steel. "These dogs are trained to find truth, Officer Briggs, not to play along with deception. Titan's showing us exactly where his loyalty lies, with his training and with those who honor it. As if to emphasize her point, Titan sat perfectly at Kalaya's heel, his alert gaze fixed forward, ignoring Briggs completely. It was the posture of a dog who had found his true north again after being forced off course. Geneva watched this display with grim satisfaction. "Ms. Rhodes, would you mind helping me with a few more exercises? I want to document exactly how Titan responds to proper commands versus..." She glanced pointedly at Briggs. "Improper ones." For the next 2 hours, they ran through a comprehensive evaluation. Kalaya used the Dutch commands exactly as they were meant to be used, and Titan performed flawlessly. Every search, every alert, every response aligned perfectly with Geneva's original training protocols. Roman documented everything on video while Geneva took detailed notes. Briggs stood to the side, his attempts to maintain composure cracking with each successful demonstration. "This should be more than enough," Geneva finally announced, closing her notebook. "Detective Hale, I'll have my full report to you by tomorrow morning, including comparisons to Titan's original training records and my professional assessment of how his responses have been manipulated in recent years." Kalaya gave Titan a final pat before stepping away. The dog whined softly, clearly reluctant to see her go. Geneva noticed this too, adding it to her mental notes. A canine's instincts about character were rarely wrong. "Thank you for your help today," Geneva told Kalaya quietly as they walked back to their cars. "You may have done more than just expose one corrupt officer. You've helped prove that these dogs can't be forced to participate in dishonest practices forever. Truth has a way of surfacing." As they prepared to leave, Geneva watched Titan being led back to Briggs's cruiser. The dog's body language told her everything she needed to know. This wasn't just about commands or training anymore. It was about integrity, about the unbreakable bond between a working dog and its true purpose. Roman helped Geneva gather her documentation, their expression serious as they considered the implications of what they'd witnessed. This evidence would be crucial in building their case, but it also meant the danger to Kalaya had just increased significantly. Briggs wouldn't take this exposure lightly. The sun was setting as they finished up, casting long shadows across the training yard where so many honest working dogs had learned their duties. Geneva stood watching the cars pull away, her heart heavy with the weight of what she'd discovered but determined to see justice done, for Titan, for Kalaya, and for every K9 officer who deserved better than to be used as a prop in someone's corrupt scheme. Officer Dean Briggs paced his office, running his hands through his hair. The walls seemed to be closing in. His computer screen showed Geneva Polk's preliminary report, every word a threat to the carefully constructed facade he'd maintained for years. He pulled up the incident report from Kalaya's arrest, fingers hovering over the keyboard. With a few keystrokes, he began altering details. The time of the stop shifted slightly. Titan's alert response became more aggressive. Kalaya's behavior grew more suspicious. Small changes, but enough to paint a different picture. Down the hall, Roman watched through his office window as Briggs made yet another anxious phone call. The detective's desk was covered with deployment logs Geneva had uncovered. Dozens of cases where Titan had supposedly found drugs in exactly the right places, at exactly the right times. "Too perfect," Roman muttered, circling another suspicious entry. His eyes narrowed as he spotted a familiar date, the night Malachi Rhodes died. According to the logs, Titan and Briggs had been there, though this detail never appeared in the official report. The detective's phone buzzed. Geneva's message was urgent. "Found more records. Titan was deployed 6 times the night Malachi died. All successful hits. Statistically impossible." Roman immediately called Kalaya. She answered on the first ring. "Listen carefully," he said, keeping his voice low. "We're finding connections between Briggs, Titan, and your brother's death. But Briggs knows we're closing in. You need to watch your back." "I'm always careful," Kalaya replied, though her voice trembled slightly. "I mean it," Roman insisted. "Don't go anywhere alone if you can help it. Check your surroundings. And Kalaya, if anything feels wrong, anything at all, call me immediately." What neither of them knew was that Briggs had already put his plan in motion. As they spoke, he was in the parking lot where Kalaya's car sat, methodically tampering with her brake lines. His hands were steady. He'd done this before. That evening, Kalaya finished her last delivery and headed home along the winding back roads she always took. The night was moonless, the pavement barely visible beyond her headlights. She thought about Roman's warning as she approached a sharp curve. Her foot pressed the brake pedal. Nothing happened. Her heart lurched as she pumped the pedal frantically. The car kept accelerating. The curve rushed toward her, a black maw in the darkness. She yanked the emergency brake, but the car was moving too fast. The world spun in a sickening whirl of shadows and scattered light. The impact came with a deafening crash. Metal screamed against metal as her car slammed into the guardrail, spinning across the road like a deadly carousel. When it finally stopped, she was upside down, seatbelt cutting into her chest. Through her dazed consciousness, she heard barking. Familiar barking. Roman had been driving home when he spotted the smoke. As he pulled up, Titan was already leaping from the patrol car, racing toward the wreck. The dog's powerful body launched through the shattered window, jaws closing gently but firmly on Kalaya's arm. "Careful, boy," Roman called, working to stabilize the car. "Easy now." Titan's pull was steady and controlled. Inch by inch, he helped Kalaya maneuver through the window. Roman reached them just as she cleared the wreck, supporting her as her legs gave way. The explosion came seconds later, a whoosh of superheated air that knocked them all to the ground. Roman covered Kalaya with his body while Titan pressed against them both, shielding them from the worst of the heat. When the flames died down enough to move, Roman helped Kalaya to his car. She was shaking uncontrollably, eyes fixed on the burning wreck that should have been her tomb. Titan stayed pressed against her legs, his presence solid and reassuring. "This wasn't an accident," Roman said grimly, examining the skid marks. "Someone cut your brake lines." Kalaya nodded, still trembling. "Briggs, it has to be." "We'll prove it." Roman's voice was steel. "But first, we need to get you somewhere safe. Geneva has a place, off the grid. You'll stay there until we can bring him down." As they drove away, Titan's head rested on Kalaya's shoulder, his warmth helping to still her shaking. She buried her fingers in his fur, grateful beyond words for his timely rescue. In the rearview mirror, the flames of her car painted the night sky orange, a beacon announcing that the game had changed. Briggs had escalated from threats to attempted murder. But he'd failed, thanks to an extraordinary dog who seemed to have appointed himself her guardian angel. Roman's hands tightened on the steering wheel as he drove, his mind already planning their next moves. They had evidence of corruption, proof of tampering, and now an attempted murder to add to the charges. But Briggs was desperate, and desperate men were dangerous. Geneva was waiting when they arrived at the safe house, her face grave as she took in Kalaya's soot-stained clothes and shell-shocked expression. She led them inside without a word, Titan padding faithfully behind. "You'll be safe here," Geneva assured her, showing her to a small but comfortable bedroom. "No one knows about this place except a few trusted friends. And," she added with a slight smile, "I think Titan's made it clear he's not leaving your side." The German shepherd, as if understanding, settled himself firmly by Kalaya's bed. His alert posture said clearer than words that nothing would harm her while he stood guard. Roman updated Geneva on the situation while Kalaya cleaned up and changed. They spoke in low voices about security measures, evidence protection, and next steps. The attempted murder had raised the stakes exponentially. Later, as Roman prepared to leave, he paused in the doorway. "We'll get him, Kalaya. I promise you that. What happened tonight, it's the proof we needed that he's desperate. Desperate enough to make mistakes." Kalaya nodded, her hand absently stroking Titan's head. "Thank you. Both of you. I'd be dead if—" "Don't think about that," Geneva interrupted gently. "Focus on staying safe. Let us handle Briggs." As the night settled around the safe house, Kalaya lay awake, listening to Titan's steady breathing beside her bed. The events of the evening played on repeat in her mind. The terror of the crash, the heat of the explosion, the miracle of survival. She thought about Malachi, wondering if he'd faced similar dangers before his death. Had Briggs arranged his overdose the same way he'd tried to arrange her accident? The parallel made her shudder. Titan stirred at her movement, raising his head to check on her. His deep brown eyes held such intelligence, such dedication. He'd saved her life tonight, this remarkable dog who'd chosen truth over training, right over routine. "Thank you," she whispered to him. His tail thumped once against the floor, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond they now shared, forged in fire and sealed with trust. The morning sun filtered through Geneva's kitchen windows, casting long shadows across the worn wooden table where papers and files lay scattered. Kalaya sat with her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee, the bruises from last night's crash visible on her arms. Titan lay at her feet, his steady presence a constant comfort. Geneva pored over a stack of old deployment logs, her reading glasses perched on her nose. Her weathered hands moved methodically through the documents, cross-referencing dates and locations. Roman stood by the counter, his own coffee untouched as he studied a timeline they'd sketched on a large whiteboard. "Here," Geneva said suddenly, her finger landing on a page. "Look at this. 3 days before Malachi's death, there's a formal complaint filed against Briggs. The signature's been redacted, but the timestamp matches." Kalaya leaned forward, her heart pounding. "That was Malachi. It has to be. He told me he was going to report something big, but he never said what." Roman moved closer, examining the document. "And look at this. The very next day, Briggs requested an immediate reassignment for Titan. Claimed it was for specialized training, but there's no record of any such training taking place." Geneva's face darkened with anger. "He took Titan away from his regular handler right after that complaint was filed. Started using him exclusively for his own operations." Kalaya's hands tightened around her mug. "And 2 days later, my brother was dead." The silence in the kitchen grew heavy with the weight of this revelation. Titan, sensing the tension, pressed closer to Kalaya's legs. Geneva spread out more papers, her movements precise despite her obvious anger. "I've gone through every deployment record from that point forward. The pattern is clear. Briggs was using Titan strategically, bringing him to scenes where evidence had already been planted." "But why?" Kalaya asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. "Legitimacy," Roman answered grimly. "A K-9 alert is considered probable cause. If Titan signaled at a scene, it gave Briggs legal justification for searches that would have otherwise been questionable." Geneva nodded. Except Titan wasn't actually alerting. Briggs was staging it, using commands that looked official to observers but weren't part of Titan's real training. That's why he responded so differently to Kalaya's Dutch command. It was what he was originally taught. Kalaya stood abruptly, needing to move. She paced the kitchen, pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. "Malachi must have figured it out. He worked in that neighborhood. He would have seen the pattern of arrests, the same people being targeted." And when he reported it, Roman continued, Briggs moved quickly to silence him, used his connections to stage an overdose, knowing Malika's history of past substance abuse would make it believable. Tears burned in Kalaya's eyes, but her voice remained steady. He killed my brother, used that noble dog to build his corrupt empire, and when Maliki threatened to expose him, Titan whined softly, rising to press against her leg. She knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around his thick neck. You were used too, weren't you, boy? Forced to play a part in all those lies. Geneva's voice was thick with emotion. I trained him to find real contraband, to be honest in his work. Briggs corrupted that, twisted it into a tool for his schemes. Roman began pinning new notes to their timeline. We can prove it now. The reassignment request right after the complaint, the pattern of deployments, the irregularities in the arrest records, it all points to systematic abuse of power. And attempted murder, Kalaya added, touching the bruise on her arm. He tried to kill me the same way he killed Maliki, making it look like an accident. Geneva gathered the papers into organized piles, her movements deliberate. We have enough to take him down, but we need to move carefully. He still has connections, people who've benefited from his corruption. Kalaya stood, her grief transforming into resolution. I don't care how dangerous it is. Maliki died trying to expose this. I owe it to him to finish what he started. We'll do it right, Roman assured her. Build an airtight case. He won't be able to squirm out of this one. Titan's tail thumped against the floor, his eyes fixed on Kalaya with unwavering loyalty. She managed a small smile, scratching behind his ears. At least we have one unimpeachable witness. Titan's behavior tells the truth, even when Briggs tried to make him lie. Geneva began sorting the evidence into separate files. We need to get these documents somewhere safe. Briggs will do anything to destroy them if he realizes what we've found. I'll handle that, Roman said. I have secure storage at the station, accessible only with biometric authorization. Kalaya returned to the table, studying the timeline they'd created. Her finger traced the date of Maliki's death, then moved to the crash that had nearly claimed her own life. He's taken so much from so many people, used his badge and his power to hurt instead of protect. And now he'll answer for all of it, Geneva said firmly. Every false arrest, every planted drug cache, every abuse of Titan's training, we'll expose it all. The morning light had strengthened, filling the kitchen with warmth. Kalaya felt the weight of their discovery settling into her bones, the grief of confirmation warring with the satisfaction of finally understanding. Her brother hadn't died in vain. His attempt to expose corruption would finally bear fruit. Titan nudged her hand, his warm breath against her palm offering comfort. She looked into his intelligent eyes and saw not just a trained police dog, but a partner in uncovering truth. Like her, he had been underestimated. Like her, he had refused to be corrupted. We need to move fast, Roman said, checking his phone. Briggs will know something's wrong when Kalaya survived the crash. He'll be desperate. Geneva nodded grimly. Then we'd better get to work. We have a corrupt officer to bring down and a lot of wrongs to right. The trio bent over their evidence, organizing, analyzing, building their case. Outside, the sun climbed higher, marking the beginning of a day that would change everything. Justice, so long delayed, was finally within reach. Detective Roman Hale sat at his desk, surrounded by stacks of carefully organized folders. His eyes burned from hours of reviewing documentation, but determination kept him focused. Each piece of paper represented another thread in the web of corruption they were slowly untangling. He reached for a requisition form, only to pause. Something wasn't right. The drawer where he'd stored key evidence files yesterday felt lighter. He methodically went through the contents, his jaw tightening. 3 crucial reports were missing. ones that directly linked Briggs to suspicious seizures. "Looking for something, Detective?" Lieutenant Matthews stood in his doorway, arms crossed. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across his face. "Just organizing some case files," Roman replied carefully, keeping his voice neutral. "Funny thing about paperwork, it's easy to misplace." Matthews stepped inside, closing the door. "Word of advice? Some matters are better left alone, especially when they involve decorated officers." Roman met his gaze steadily. "Every officer should be held to the same standard, Lieutenant. That's what the badge means. Idealism is admirable, Hale, but it can be career suicide." Matthews straightened his tie. "Think about your pension, your future. Some battles aren't worth fighting." After Matthews left, Roman pulled out his phone and typed a quick message to Kalaya. "Evidence disappearing. Need backup plan." Across town, Kalaya stood in Geneva's training yard, watching Titan work. The morning sun cast long shadows as Geneva set up another test scenario. Small containers were arranged in a careful pattern, only one containing the target scent. "Remember," Geneva instructed, adjusting her body camera, "we need clear footage of every indication. No room for doubt." Kalaya nodded, her hand steady on the camera she held. They had been documenting Titan's responses for hours, building irrefutable proof of his proper training and authentic reactions. "This will show how a properly trained K9 actually behaves," Geneva explained, positioning markers. "How they indicate real substances versus responding to handler cues. The difference is obvious once you know what to look for." Titan sat alertly, waiting for commands. His ears perked forward when Kalaya spoke the Dutch word for search. He moved methodically through the course, nose working. When he reached the fifth container, he sat sharply, giving the passive alert that indicated a find. "Perfect," Geneva said, checking the placement. "That's his genuine response. No false positives, no hesitation. Now let's document him ignoring Briggs's typical cues." They played a recording of Briggs's commands. Titan's ears flattened, but he remained still, refusing to give a false alert. Geneva nodded in satisfaction, while Kalaya captured every moment. "The contrast is undeniable," Geneva said, reviewing the footage. "Any K9 expert will see the difference between his proper training and how Briggs misused him." Kalaya lowered her camera. "But will it be enough? Roman says they're already trying to bury the paper trail. That's why we're building multiple layers of proof." Geneva began setting up another scenario. "They can lose documents, but they can't explain away Titan's behavior. We'll demonstrate it publicly if we have to." Roman arrived as they were completing the final tests. His tie was loosened, and worry lines creased his forehead. "They're moving faster than we expected. Internal Affairs is suddenly too busy to review my reports. Files are vanishing. Matthews practically threatened me this morning. Then we move faster too." Kalaya showed him their footage. "We've documented everything. Titan's authentic responses, his rejection of false cues, the proper K9 protocols Geneva taught him." "Good." Roman ran a hand through his hair. "We need something they can't sweep under the rug, something public enough that they'll have to address it." Geneva was already mapping out a plan. "The department's community outreach event is next week. They always do K9 demonstrations. It would be the perfect venue to show how Titan really works." "And how he's been misused," Kalaya added, "with dozens of witnesses and cameras present." Roman considered it. Briggs won't let Titan anywhere near that event if he suspects something. "He won't have a choice." Geneva smiled grimly. "I still have authority as the department's former head trainer. I can request a demonstration of my previous students' maintained skills. It's standard procedure." They spent the next hour refining their strategy. Geneva would submit the official request through proper channels, making it difficult to deny without raising questions. Kalaya would prepare video evidence packages for select media contacts, insurance against interference. Roman would continue gathering what documentation he could while appearing to back down. "We only get one shot at this," Roman warned. "If we miss, we won't." Kalaya's voice was firm. "Too many people have suffered because of Briggs. Malachi died trying to expose him. We owe it to everyone to get this right." Geneva finished typing her formal request. "Titan knows the truth. In front of witnesses, following proper protocols, he'll show everyone exactly what's been happening." The afternoon sun slanted through the training yard's fence, casting striped shadows across their determined faces. Titan sat alertly between them, his presence a reminder of why they fought. His training represented integrity and truth, everything Briggs had corrupted. "I'll submit this first thing tomorrow," Geneva said, sealing the request envelope. "Once it's in the system, they'll have to respond officially. Any interference will just add to our evidence of misconduct." Roman checked his watch. "I should get back. Need to maintain appearances while we set this up." "Be careful," Kalaya urged. "They're already watching you." "Always am." He managed a tired smile. "Keep working with Titan. The stronger our demonstration evidence, the better our chances." As Roman left, Kalaya and Geneva returned to their testing. They would document every proper response, every ignored false cue, building an ironclad case that even departmental politics couldn't dismiss. Titan worked eagerly, his every action proving that truth would prevail over corruption. The sun continued its arc overhead as they refined their plans. Each step was carefully considered, each contingency examined. They were no longer just fighting one corrupt officer. They were challenging a system that protected him. But with preparation, dedication, and an honest dog's unfailing instincts, they would force that system to face its failures. Geneva checked the final video sequence. Perfect. No one can deny what they see here. Just like no one will be able to deny what they see at the demonstration, Kalaya agreed, her voice strong with conviction. They had turned a corner. Defense was becoming offense. Documentation was becoming ammunition. Soon, very soon, truth would have its day in the light. The courthouse loomed before Kalaya like a mountain of stone and judgment. She smoothed her navy blue dress with trembling hands and took a deep breath. The morning sun caught the brass handles of the heavy wooden doors as she climbed the steps, each footfall echoing with purpose. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with whispered conversations and rustling papers. Kalaya sat at the defense table, her shoulders straight despite the weight pressing down on her. Roman sat in the gallery directly behind her, a silent pillar of support. Her attorney, Sarah Chen, arranged documents with precise movements, her calm demeanor helping steady Kalaya's nerves. Officer Briggs sat at the prosecution table, radiating smug confidence. His dress uniform gleamed with medals and commendations, shields that had protected his corruption for far too long. He barely glanced at Kalaya, as if she were already forgotten. "All rise." The bailiff's voice cut through the murmurs. The Honorable Judge, Marcus Wellington presiding. Judge Wellington settled into his chair, his silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses giving him an air of wisdom. He reviewed the charges before him with careful attention. "We're here today regarding case number 2023-478, People v. Kalaya Rhodes. Charges include interference with a police animal and obstruction of justice." "Your Honor." Sarah Chen stood. "Before we proceed, the defense requests permission for a demonstration crucial to Ms. Rhodes's case." The prosecutor, Alan Martinez, immediately objected. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Any demonstration should have been submitted during discovery. The demonstration involves new evidence that has only recently come to light, Sarah countered. Evidence that directly relates to both charges against my client. Judge Wellington studied both attorneys. What kind of demonstration are we talking about, Ms. Chen? With the court's permission, we'd like to bring in a key witness, the K-9 officer Titan, along with his original trainer Geneva Polk. Their testimony and actions will prove my client's innocence and reveal serious misconduct. Martinez shot to his feet. Objection! This is nothing but theater meant to distract from the defendant's clear guilt. Overruled. The judge's gavel cracked once. I'll allow it, but this better be relevant, Ms. Chen. At Sarah's nod, the bailiff opened the side door. Geneva entered, leading Titan on a regulation leather leash. The German shepherd's nails clicked against the polished floor as he moved with military precision. His alert eyes scanned the room, lingering first on Kalaya, then on Briggs. Ms. Polk, please state your credentials for the court, Sarah requested. Geneva stood tall, her voice carrying authority earned through decades of experience. I served as head K-9 trainer for the department for 23 years. I personally selected and trained Titan from 8 weeks old until his deployment 4 years ago. I've certified over 100 police dogs and written the department's current K-9 training protocols. And what can you tell us about Titan's training? Titan was, and is, one of the finest dogs I've ever trained. His scent detection abilities are exceptional, and his responses are absolutely reliable when proper protocols are followed. Martinez interrupted. Your Honor, we stipulate to the dog's training. What we're here about is the defendant's deliberate interference with his duties. If you'll allow us to proceed, Sarah said smoothly, you'll see exactly how Titan performs his duties. She turned back to Geneva. Ms. Polk, would you please position Titan for a demonstration? Geneva guided Titan to the center of the courtroom. Sarah's assistant placed 3 identical briefcases in a row. One contained planted evidence they'd prepared. The second was empty. The third was Briggs's personal briefcase, which he'd brought into court that morning. Objection. Martinez was on his feet again. We weren't notified of any intended searches. Your Honor, Sarah responded, this demonstration will take less than 5 minutes and will conclusively prove whether my client interfered with Titan's training or simply revealed his proper responses. The judge considered, then nodded. Proceed, but keep it brief. Kalaya's heart pounded as she stood. This was the moment everything hinged on. Geneva had assured her Titan would perform exactly as trained, but so much could go wrong. Ms. Rhodes, Sarah said, please give Titan the same command you used during the traffic stop. Kalaya took a steadying breath. Zoek, she said clearly, using the Dutch command for search. Titan's ears pricked forward. He moved with purpose, ignoring the planted evidence in the first briefcase. He passed the empty one without pause. When he reached Briggs's briefcase, he sat immediately and barked, the trained signal for finding contraband. Objection, Martinez shouted. This is an illegal search. But Briggs's reaction drew all eyes. He had half risen, his face flushed with anger and fear. That's my personal property. The judge banged his gavel. Order. Mr. Martinez, given the charges involve the dog's responses, I'm inclined to see this through. Bailiff, please check the briefcase. You can't do this, Briggs protested, but the bailiff was already opening the catches. Inside, nestled among legal papers, lay a burner phone. The bailiff lifted it out. Your Honor, Sarah said quietly, we have evidence linking that phone to a series of calls coordinating drug shipments through our city. Calls that coincide with Detective Roman Hale's investigation into corruption within the K-9 unit. The courtroom erupted in shocked voices. Briggs lunged for the briefcase, but 2 court officers immediately moved to restrain him. The judge's gavel cracked repeatedly. "Order! Order in this court!" Judge Wellington's voice cut through the chaos. "Bailiff, secure that evidence. Mr. Martinez, I believe the FBI will want to examine that phone immediately." He turned to Briggs, his expression thunderous. "And Officer Briggs, you are remanded into custody pending an investigation into these serious allegations." As Briggs was led away in handcuffs, his face twisted with impotent rage, Kalaya felt tears of relief spring to her eyes. Geneva's hand found her shoulder, squeezing gently. "Good boy, Titan," Geneva murmured. The German shepherd sat perfectly at attention, having done exactly what his training required, finding real contraband, not responding to false cues. The judge was already making notes. "Ms. Chen, in light of this development, I'm dismissing all charges against Ms. Rhodes. Furthermore, I'm ordering a complete review of all cases involving Officer Briggs and the K-9 unit." The gallery behind Kalaya erupted in muffled cheers. She saw Roman nodding in satisfaction, his months of careful investigation finally bearing fruit. Sarah gathered her papers, a small smile playing at her lips. But it was Titan who held Kalaya's attention. The dog who had first exposed the truth that dark night during a traffic stop had done it again, this time before witnesses who couldn't ignore it. His unwavering honesty had cut through years of corruption like a blade of truth. The courtroom continued to buzz with activity as FBI agents arrived to secure evidence and begin immediate interviews. Briggs's phone would reveal an entire network of corruption, but that would be another day's battle. For now, Kalaya simply breathed in her freedom, grateful for the unlikely alliance of a dedicated detective, a principled trainer, and one very special dog who knew truth couldn't be compromised. The video appeared on social media first. Someone had edited together fragments of body cam footage showing Kalaya whispering to Titan during the initial traffic stop. The caption read, "Watch how this woman manipulates a trained police dog." Within hours, it had spread like wildfire. Kalaya sat in her holding cell, staring at the gray concrete walls. After the triumph in the courtroom, everything had unraveled with shocking speed. The edited footage made her look suspicious, cutting out crucial context and Briggs's aggressive behavior. Instead, it showed only her leaning toward Titan, speaking in what the captions called secret commands. The cell door clanged open. Sarah Chen, her attorney, walked in with slumped shoulders and tired eyes. "They're calling it tampering with a police animal," she said quietly. "The footage has gone viral. People are saying you used insider knowledge to compromise police operations." Kalaya's hands trembled in her lap. "But that's not what happened. The full footage shows—" "The full footage has disappeared from evidence," Sarah interrupted gently, "along with several other key documents from Roman's investigation." A cold weight settled in Kalaya's stomach. How is that possible? Briggs has friends in high places. The department claims there was a system malfunction that corrupted several files. Sarah's voice was bitter. Very convenient timing. Through the small window in her cell, Kalaya could hear fragments of news reports from the guard's television. The anchors were debating whether all K-9-related arrests should be reviewed, not because of Briggs's corruption, but because of possible outside interference from people like her. "What about Roman?" Kalaya asked, dreading the answer. Sarah shook her head. "Suspended pending investigation. They're claiming he helped you orchestrate the courtroom demonstration without proper authorization. His entire investigation is being painted as a personal vendetta against Briggs." Tears burned in Kalaya's eyes. "I've ruined everything," she whispered. "Roman's career, the case against Briggs, any chance of justice for Malachi." Her voice broke on her brother's name. "That's not true," Sarah insisted, but Kalaya barely heard her. "The Media was having a field day. Expert after expert appeared on screen, explaining how K9 units could be compromised by people with inside knowledge. Kalaya's past engagement to a K9 officer was dredged up and dissected. Her multiple jobs were portrayed as suspicious. Why did she work so many different positions if not to gather intelligence? Even Geneva had been forced to step back, her reputation under attack. The training facility where they'd tested Titan was being audited. Years of her work with police dogs was being questioned because she had facilitated unauthorized access to K9 training methods. Briggs's attorney had filed multiple motions. He argued that the entire courtroom demonstration was invalid because it hadn't followed proper K9 deployment protocols. He claimed Titan had been subjected to outside influence that compromised his reliability as a police dog. The burner phone was inadmissible because the search hadn't been properly authorized. Kalaya pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to stop the tears. She thought of Deontay, probably watching all this unfold on television. What would he think, seeing his aunt portrayed as someone who manipulated police dogs to help criminals? The careful life she'd built for him was crumbling. "We can fight this," Sarah said firmly. "The truth is still the truth, even if they're trying to bury it. Titan knows what really happened. His behavior patterns over years of service tell the real story." But Kalaya could barely muster hope. She thought of that moment in the courtroom, when everything had seemed so clear. Titan finding the phone, Briggs's mask finally cracking, justice within reach. Now it felt like a dream, replaced by this nightmare where she was the villain. "What happens now?" she asked numbly. Sarah consulted her notes. "Briggs's attorney is pushing for immediate release based on compromised evidence. Meanwhile, they want to keep you held as a flight risk. They're arguing that your multiple jobs and delivery routes show you have too many connections that could help you disappear." The irony was bitter. The very jobs she'd worked to support Deontay were being used to paint her as suspicious. Everything she'd done out of love and responsibility was being twisted into something sinister. Through her cell window, Kalaya could see a small patch of sky growing dark. Somewhere out there, Titan was probably confused and distressed, separated from both Briggs and Geneva. The dog who had tried to reveal the truth was now caught in the middle of this tangled web of lies. "I should never have whispered that command," Kalaya said softly. "If I'd just let Briggs plant whatever he wanted in my car that night." "Then he would have kept doing it to other people," Sarah cut in sharply. "And your brother's death would have remained unexplained. You did the right thing, Kalaya. The system is fighting back hard because you exposed something they wanted to keep hidden." But Kalaya couldn't shake the feeling that she'd failed everyone who had tried to help her. Roman, who had risked his career to investigate. Geneva, who had believed in Titan's training and integrity. Even Titan himself, who had only ever done what he was truly trained to do: find real contraband, not play along with staged scenarios. The cell felt smaller by the minute. On the television down the hall, another expert was analyzing the leaked footage, pointing out how Kalaya's suspicious behavior showed premeditation. The guard walked past, giving her a look that mixed disappointment with judgment. Sarah squeezed her hand before leaving. "Don't give up. The truth leaves traces that can't be erased completely. We'll find a way to bring it back to light." But as the cell door clanged shut, Kalaya had never felt more alone. The system she dared to challenge wasn't just pushing back. It was trying to crush her completely. And it was working. She curled up on the narrow bunk, thinking of all the people who had believed in her, who had risked everything to help expose the truth. Now they were all paying the price for her courage. Or had it been recklessness? The line between the two felt blurry now. Outside, the media storm continued to grow. Inside her cell, Kalaya Rhodes, who had only ever wanted justice, wondered if some truths were better left buried, and if the cost of exposing them was too high to bear. Geneva's fingers flew across her keyboard, her weathered hands steady despite the urgency of the moment. The glow of multiple monitors lit up her small home office as she dug deeper into Titan's GPS collar data. She'd spent 20 years training police dogs, but she'd never expected to be using their tracking systems to expose corruption. "I can't believe we didn't think of this sooner," she muttered, pulling up months of archived location data. "Every K9 unit has mandatory GPS tracking. It's standard procedure." Roman leaned over her shoulder, his tie loosened after another tense day at the department. His recent suspension had been quietly lifted, though he was relegated to desk duty, a small victory that at least gave him access to crucial files. There, Geneva pointed to a series of red dots on the screen. These are all the locations where Titan's collar registered stops during Briggs's shifts. The blue markers show the officially logged locations from his reports. The difference was striking. While the blue markers showed a normal patrol pattern, the red dots revealed frequent detours to industrial areas and abandoned properties. Some stops lasted mere minutes, others for hours, none of them mentioned in any official documentation. "Look at this pattern," Geneva zoomed in on a particular cluster. "These warehouse visits, they're regular, every Tuesday and Friday night between 11:30 and midnight." Roman pulled out his notebook, cross-referencing dates. "Those match perfectly with some of our suspected trafficking timeframes. And here," he tapped the screen. "This location. It's less than a mile from where Malachi was found." The weight of that connection hung heavy in the room. Geneva pulled up more recent data, her expression grim but determined. "Briggs is still making these stops. Even with all this heat on him, he's keeping to the same schedule. Either he's incredibly arrogant, or he can't change the pattern without disrupting their whole operation," Roman finished. He straightened up, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "We need to catch him in the act. No edited footage, no manipulated evidence. Just pure, undeniable proof." Geneva nodded, already plotting coordinates on a fresh map. "Titan's next scheduled patrol with Briggs is tomorrow night. Based on these patterns, he'll likely visit this warehouse." She circled a location near the river docks. "It's perfect for their operation. Isolated, multiple escape routes, easy water access." "We'll need to be careful," Roman cautioned. "If Briggs spots us—" "He won't," Geneva said firmly. "I know every trick these dogs are trained for. I know how to stay downwind, how to move without triggering their attention. And more importantly," her voice softened, "I know Titan. Even if he senses us, he won't alert Briggs. That dog knows who's really on his side." Roman checked his phone. Another text from Kalaya's attorney, updating him on the mounting legal pressure. Time was running out. If they couldn't find solid evidence soon, Kalaya would face serious charges while Briggs walked free. "I'll coordinate with a trusted team," he said, already making mental notes. "We'll need witnesses who can't be dismissed or intimidated. Multiple cameras, everything by the book." Geneva was already preparing equipment: night vision goggles, silent radios, specialized recording devices. "We do this right," she said, "and Titan's own tracking data will be the key to bringing down the very operation he was forced to help conceal." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. The same technology Briggs had relied on to maintain his facade of legitimate police work would now expose his crimes. Every unauthorized stop, every suspicious pattern, every deviation from reported routes, it was all there in the cold, hard data, just waiting to be used. "Send me those coordinates," Roman said, heading for the door. "I'll start putting the pieces in place. Tomorrow night we end this." Geneva nodded, her eyes still fixed on the screen where red dots marked years of corruption. "For Kalaya," she said softly, "for Malachi, and for Titan, He deserves to work with handlers who honor what he was truly trained to do. As Roman left, Geneva began meticulously documenting every GPS log, every pattern, every piece of evidence they'd need. Tomorrow would require perfect timing, flawless execution, and more than a little luck. But for the first time since this whole nightmare began, they had something Briggs couldn't manipulate or explain away. The undeniable truth, recorded by the very system he'd taken for granted. The warehouse loomed before them in the darkness, its weathered walls casting long shadows in the moonlight. Roman, Geneva, and their small team of trusted officers crouched behind shipping containers, watching as trucks pulled up to the loading dock. Through night vision binoculars, they could see figures moving crates with practiced efficiency. "Just like the GPS log showed," Geneva whispered, checking her watch. 11:45 exactly. Roman grabbed his radio, speaking in hushed tones to the backup units positioned nearby. "All teams hold position. Wait for my signal." Headlights swept across the yard as another vehicle approached. Roman's grip tightened on his weapon as Officer Briggs's patrol car came into view. Titan sat in the back, alert but clearly uncomfortable. "Move in now," Roman commanded, and officers emerged from their positions. The first shout of "Police!" was met with immediate gunfire. Bullets pinged off metal containers as the traffickers scattered. Roman and his team returned fire, trying to contain the chaos. In the confusion, a stray round struck a gas line along the warehouse wall. The hiss of escaping gas filled the air. "Everyone out!" Roman yelled, but another explosion rocked the building. Part of the roof collapsed, trapping Titan under a mess of wooden beams and metal sheeting. The dog's pained whimper cut through the mayhem. Without hesitation, Kalaya broke from her position of safety. "Kalaya, no!" Roman shouted, but she was already sprinting toward the building. Smoke poured from broken windows as she disappeared inside. The heat was intense, flames licking up the walls. Kalaya crawled under the thick smoke, following Titan's distressed sounds. She found him pinned beneath a fallen beam, struggling weakly. Using all her strength, she managed to lift the beam just enough for Titan to wiggle free. The dog pressed against her leg, limping but alive. The building groaned ominously above them. Flames roared closer, and the air grew thicker with each passing second. Kalaya wrapped her arms around Titan, helping support his injured side as they made their way toward the exit, every step a battle against time and toxic smoke. Through the smoke and chaos, Kalaya steadied herself against a scorched wall. Her throat burned, but she managed to whisper the Dutch command that had started it all. "Zoken." Titan's ears perked up instantly. Despite his limp, he moved with renewed purpose, leading them through the burning warehouse. The dog weaved between fallen beams and around patches of fire, his training overcoming his injuries. He stopped at a seemingly solid wall and began pawing at its base, revealing a hidden panel. Kalaya pushed against it, discovering a concealed room. Inside, metal filing cabinets lined the walls. Stacks of cash sat beside detailed ledgers, years of trafficking operations meticulously documented. Most importantly, there were photographs and documents clearly showing Briggs's involvement. A shadow moved behind them. "Step away from those files," Briggs's voice commanded, tight with desperation. But before he could act, Titan sprang forward with unexpected strength. The dog crashed into Briggs's chest, sending him sprawling backward. The corrupt officer's head hit the concrete floor with a dull thud, stunning him long enough for Roman to burst in through the smoke. "Dean Briggs, you're under arrest," Roman announced, quickly securing the handcuffs while Titan kept watch. The building gave another threatening groan. Flames were consuming the structure faster now. Roman grabbed the ledgers while Kalaya helped steady Titan. Together they rushed toward the exit as burning debris rained down around them. The evidence they needed was finally in their hands, but they weren't safe yet. In the weeks that followed, justice moved swiftly. The evidence recovered from the warehouse proved irrefutable. Officer Dean Briggs and his network of corrupt officers faced multiple charges, their web of deception finally exposed. More importantly, the truth about Malachi Rhodes emerged. "Your brother was a hero," Police Chief Martinez told Kalaya during the formal ceremony. "He tried to expose corruption at great personal risk. Today, we officially clear his name and acknowledge the wrong done to your family." Kalaya clutched the formal apology letter, tears flowing freely as she thought of her brother. Deontay stood beside her, holding her hand tightly. The 10-year-old boy understood enough to know that his father's memory was finally honored. Detective Roman Hale's reinstatement came with a promotion. He had risked everything to pursue the truth, and now his integrity was recognized. The connection that had sparked between him and Kalaya during the investigation grew naturally into something deeper. They took things slowly, sharing coffee breaks and long walks while discussing their hopes for the future. Titan, too, found his reward. After Geneva certified him as psychologically sound, he was officially retired from police work. Kalaya adopted him, giving him a new name to match his new life: Harbor. The name represented safety, protection, and home, everything he had helped her achieve. On a peaceful evening months later, Kalaya sat in her backyard watching the sunset paint the sky in soft oranges and pinks. Harbor's heavy head rested contentedly in her lap, his eyes half closed as she stroked his ears. From inside the house came the sound of Deontay's laughter as he worked on homework at the kitchen table. The simple moment felt like a miracle, a life rebuilt from broken pieces into something beautiful. Harbor looked up at her with those knowing eyes, and Kalaya smiled. Sometimes truth came with a whisper, and justice with a bark. But in the end, courage and honesty had won the day, bringing healing to them all. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.